Alright, I don't even know how to make the intro for this video, but I'm gonna lock the door before Jason Voorhees comes in and impales my butthole. Yo guys. Alright, we're at to film theory. Can Jason Voorhees teleport? Alright. You know how Jason, if you have much Friday the 13th, I mean it's not really, I guess kind of a spoiler, but like whenever he like chases someone down, in the new one he runs off them, but like the old ones used to be like this. You open the door, he's gonna be behind that door somehow. You can look at him, open the door, look away, and he's right there. I'm not even joking. Like he probably can teleport. I'm not gonna lie. In the game he can teleport. In Friday the 13th the game. What the fuck? Ignore that first audio. But there's only one way to find out if you can teleport, and that's by watching this video. Alright. 3, 2, 1, let's get it. Okay, there's no audio. Strip. Don't worry, he's walking. Wow, that dude look breathe. He tripped his all. I mean, they do be tripping a lot. Film theory.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that slowly follows you as you run away, but then pops out in front of you with a machete of science. It's October, and you know what that means. That Halloween's already been canceled due to the unrelenting kick in the balls that is 2020. It honestly makes me really sad, since Halloween is one of my favorite times of the year. But you know what? I ain't wallowing around in what we don't have. I'm reveling in what we do have. And this cloud has itself a silver lining. Sure, we may not be able to engorge ourselves with free candy given to us by strangers this year, but we can still dress up and creep ourselves out all month long by spending time inside watching classic spooky movies. When it comes to Halloween horror staples, I've already covered Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger on the channel, but there's still one man missing from this trifecta of terror. You all know who I'm talking about. Jason. Released on May 9th, 1980, the spookiest season of them all, Friday the 13th was the smash hit that would launch one of the most iconic horror franchises in history. It would be the movie to introduce the world to the unstoppable killer, Pamela Voorhees, the vengeful mother who killed extremely hormonal camp counselors in her quest for revenge. Yeah, if you've never seen the original Friday the 13th, Jason isn't actually the killer of that movie. And even then, his iconic hockey mask isn't introduced until the third one. Anyway, when the series starts, his mother Pamela is the one doing all the killings because her son Jason drowned in the lake years before, when lustful camp counselors were too busy being stereotypical horror characters to save him. After his death, Pamela lost her head and tried her best to keep the camp permanently closed, but during the finale of Friday the 13th, she literally loses her head via decapitation. And this is where things get weird.
Jason sees that shit,
right before the closing credits of that 1980 film, a still 11-year-old Jason pops out of Crystal Lake and supposedly pulls Alice, the hero, down into the water. Alice survives this attack, and in Friday the 13th Part 2, no one believes her story. There's no evidence to corroborate it. Instead, we meet Jason, now a grown man who wears a sack over his head, hunting down more counselors. This confusing revelation means one of two things. Jason either grew into a hulking menace overnight, or since they never found Jason's dead body in the lake in 1957, it means that he's been living an idyllic life in the woods and only emerges again because his mom was killed in the first place. Regardless of which of these two scenarios is true, a legend was then born. A legend who eventually travels to HE double hockey sticks and to space before settling down as a farmer of 5-leaf plants that'll get us demonetized. Seriously, the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th goes to some very strange places. Across the 12 installments released between 1980 and 2009, Jason became a pop culture icon. His recognizable hockey mask, the ridiculous kills, his infamous music, and most of all, his mastery of the element of surprise. You see, one would think that someone as huge and strong as Jason would be super slow, and he is, most of the time. But then there are those moments throughout the series where he just seems to appear in a place unexpectedly. It's an impressive jump scare to say the least, but also an impressive feat of movement where he seemingly teleports from point A to point B. Like, how else could he have done that move without getting seen? It's actually a debate that's been raged by fans of this series for decades. Can Jason actually teleport? Because outside of regenerative abilities that render him basically immortal and just being really, really strong, he doesn't have any other supernatural powers. It's become such a thing that 2017's Friday the 13th, the game, featured a teleportation option. But is it true? Is Jason Voorhees just a strong dude with an iron will to live, or does he actually have magical powers that are aiding him in his revenge spree? That, my fellow theorists, is what we aim to prove today, coming to the definitive answer as to whether Jason Voorhees can teleport. Since the Friday the 13th franchise has such a loyal fan base and we didn't want them to #blame Jason for missing obvious moments, we scoured F13 message boards to put together a list of moments that potentially feature teleportation. We then did a rewatch of the entire series to make sure that we weren't missing anything. Ultimately, across the franchise's 12 movies, we wound up with 5 key moments that absolutely deserved a closer look. The first is a moment from the fan favorite Part 6, Jason Lives. This is the film that introduced the world to Super Jason, a Jason that was dead, maybe, but then awakened when lightning hits the metal rod stabbed through his body. In the scene, a couple is driving to Camp Crystal Lake when they're halted in their tracks by Jason. Upset that the obviously threatening masked killer won't clear the road for them to pass, the male character Darren does what any sane person would do, force his girlfriend to drive forward, almost hitting the pedestrian before getting out his handgun and waving it around like an idiot. Needless to say, he dies fast. His girlfriend Lisbeth attempts to escape, and in true Friday the 13th fashion, falls over her own feet into a puddle and chooses to stay there. While in the puddle, she frantically reaches into her wallet and pulls out some cash to bribe Jason so he can buy a new machete or jumpsuit, I guess. However, when she looks up, he's gone. Seconds later, Jason lands down behind her and finishes her. So, was it teleportation or something else? What makes this one easy to debunk is something that we'll be seeing a lot throughout this episode. Lisbeth takes her eyes off of Jason for 8 seconds while searching for her wallet. This gives Jason plenty of time to run around a tree and, surprise, impale her from behind. Why do I know it's enough time? As a test, I walked in a straight line for 8 seconds, covering over 40 feet with no problem. Also, in Friday the 13th Part 2, we learned that Jason is totally capable of brisk jogs. And in Part 7, New Blood, he has the ability to explode through windows with surprising agility. Jason Voorhees is just an athletic guy who only chooses to rush.
He jumps the window,
to get that sweet kill. It's not surprising that Jason would run to the tree to the right of Lisbeth, throw her off her guard, and then jump in the air to land that brutal blow. Is it unnecessary? Absolutely yes. But remember, this is also a man who climbed a tree to drop down from it and land a brutal triple decapitation. In the end, Jason covered like 10 feet max, and Elizabeth would have never seen it as she was digging in her wallet the entire time. Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan gives us our next moment of teleportation. It starts with Jason reawakening yet again, this time after being electrocuted underwater. Looking for some fresh victims, he sneaks onto a boat named the SS Lazarus, haha, cute name there guys, and immediately starts bumping off high school graduates. One of those victims is Miles, who comes across Jason on the upper deck of the Lazarus boat. After an unsuccessful attack, Miles runs and climbs down a ladder. Normally, running away without tripping is a smart move in a horror film, and yet when Miles gets to the deck below, Jason's already waiting. Many point to this as Jason teleporting. I point to this as Jason not skipping leg day.
Like, yo,
this drawing shows the journey in red that Miles took. While climbing down the ladder, Jason in yellow could have easily jumped down to the lower deck like he's done countless other times in prior films. The nice thing about being a supernatural killer is that you have supernatural knees that can absorb supernatural impacts. Plus, notice Jason's heavy breathing after that scene, suggesting that he sprinted while Miles simply ran. Jason just got himself in some solid cardio. No, that's not what's inexplicable in the scene. What defies explanation is why Miles, on a completely open air boat, decides that the only option he has is to escape straight up a ladder. He never considers running back to where he came from or, you know, jumping off the boat into the water. Nope, climb the ladder. Sure, that makes the most sense. Run in the wall. I won't jump in the wall because stands there and watches as Miles climbs, just thinking, can't believe that worked. Now, my buddy James from Dead Meat says that the ladder climb here shows Jason's ability to teleport.
Guys, did we mention that Jason can definitely teleport now?
But I gotta disagree. There are 7 seconds when Jason is off screen. More than enough time for him to get up that ladder behind his victim. See how Miles slows and eventually stops as he gets midway up the ladder? Jason loves hiding in barns. He loves climbing trees so he can jump down to nail some awesome triple kills. He is a pro climber.
That was pretty sick.
No, the much harder to explain moment from this movie comes earlier with Eva Watanabe. In it, good girl Eva is chased, without falling again, by Jason into what I lovingly call the disco lounge. Once there, she runs around and learns that all the other doors in the room are locked. And when she looks back toward where she entered, Jason bursts through. This is where things start to get real teleporty, as Eva begins to look around the room and sees Jason everywhere she looks. At first glance, it appears undeniable that Jason is teleporting across the room and is using his supernatural abilities to taunt and frighten Eva. Eva. However, after further inspection and research, I don't think the teleporting actually explains what we're seeing here. The F13 fandom page suggests that Eva might be hallucinating due to stress, flash blindness, panic, and the fact that she spun around the room 7 times before Jason entered. I'm actually inclined to agree with this interpretation, but for more detailed reasons. You see, 15 minutes before she meets her untimely end,
like he's using Dragon Ball Z, just teleporting around.
Though she initially refuses, Eva does eventually take a hit. This leads me to believe that what we're seeing in the disco lounge is a hallucination that's a mix of both fear and drugs. Notice that there appear to be 2 Jasons in this scene. The first one is the one that we see burst through the door and then move closer to the stage. We see that this Jason is breathing heavily. He awkwardly turns his head towards something. That head turn honestly makes 0 sense based on his position relative to her in the room. He's not even looking at where he would supposedly be moving to cut her off. It's very strange. But anyway, he's a Jason who is in very active pursuit of his prey. The second Jason, though, is just standing in front of the glass panel and never once moves. Like, not at all. He's not even breathing heavily. He's also standing under a purser sign. Now, a purser is someone on a boat who's responsible for all the money handling, the administrative duties, the accounting, which is weird considering a purser would probably hate doing their accounting in a disco lounge full of bad 80s music, but whatever. Anyway, it seems to me that the way this scene is shot, it's meant to be Eva subconsciously reading the sign as pursuer, which is why she's hallucinating seeing the guy who is chasing her.
Guys, I just want to eat dinner. Alright, that's off. I almost fell. I never wanted to puke in my life, and now I do. I'm joking, I didn't want to puke before 2 seconds ago, but let's get into the video.
Appearing under it. Between the stationary Jason, the sign, the constant spinning of the room, her being in a life-threatening situation, the added sensory overload of the loud music and the flashing lights, and all of it within an hour or so of her taking hard drugs, I think that this is just a confusingly shot hallucination scene. And now we go from Jason on the high seas to Jason in space! Jason X rejoins the Jason saga in the year 2455, but before we get there, we make a pit stop in 2010 to see Jason as a prisoner of the Crystal Lake Research Facility. For some reason, after decades of murder and full knowledge of his superhuman strength, the facility heads think it's totally fine having only 1 guard watching him round the clock. Surprise, surprise, Jason escapes and ambushes the soldiers who entered his chamber to move him to another facility. While he's murdering them, the film's main protagonist, Dr. Rowan, is standing outside the room listening to the budget-friendly carnage. Eventually, a soldier knocks down a door in front of Rowan, and while she's tending to him, the camera captures Jason standing behind her, breathing like he just sprinted to a store that was offering free machetes and self-help books about dealing with mother issues. So how could Jason throw a man through a door, but then just seconds later appear behind the person sitting there blocking said door? Thus asks Team Teleport, and thus answers theorist MatPat 2 exits. Watch this scene closely. After tending to the soldier thrown through the door, Rowan looks directly into the room that once held Jason captive. But earlier, when we saw the soldiers entering that room, there was an alcove. Look behind the soldiers as they march into the room, there was no door behind them. To enter, they had to walk through a door and then turn left to walk in towards Jason. This means very clearly that it's not the same door that Rowan is looking through later. This is less a moment of teleporting and more of Jason finding another exit to escape and then stopping to see that, whoops, there's another living witness, so gotta go kill her too. The hulking murder monster's work is never done, I suppose. And she would have gotten away with it too if she hadn't gotten too cocky and tried to taunt him in his cryogenic cell. Idiot. So with 4 potential teleport moments sufficiently debunked, we come to the granddaddy of them all. The most infamous moment that supporters of Team Teleport point to as the definitive moment of inexplicable Jason physics for the entire franchise. In Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan again. Wait, it's a 3rd scene from Jason Takes Manhattan? 3 out of our 5 examples are all from this one movie? Man, maybe that's why this one tends to top everyone's worst Friday the 13th list. Oh wait, no, it's definitely because it ends with him getting toxic waste dumped on him, causing him to melt until he reverts back to the scared child that he was when he died. Yep, that is how this one ends. And you wonder why I did a theory about teleporting rather than the lore of these movies. Speaking of teleporting, in our final and hardest to explain movie moment, we're not just dealing with 1 teleportation, we're actually dealing with 2 in less than a minute. In it, Jason, while pursuing a man down the street, seemingly teleports to the 2nd story of a building to throw him out a window, and then teleports back down to street level to finish him off. In this scene, Charles, soon to learn the definition of defenestration, looks behind him to presumably confirm the distance he is from Jason before entering an abandoned building.
Twice,
a
he was very
7-second pan up the building
cautious.
later, and we see Charles launched out of a window faster than a religious official in Prague. Yeah, that is a deep-cut European history reference in your video about 80s slasher victims. Welcome to the channel. Anyway, Jason looks out the window, and in another 7 seconds is standing over his target before drowning him in toxic sewage, which apparently just lays around in convenient barrels throughout the city of New York. So how did Jason get up and down the building without us ever seeing him enter or exit the door that we saw Charles go through? And how did he beat Charles up those stairs? Like Jason, I'm just gonna cut to the chase. Similar to what we just saw with Jason X, there's clearly a second entrance to the building. The biggest clue to this is when Jason appears 7 seconds later to finish off the deed. If you pay attention to the camera angle, Jason comes from another direction relative to where Charles first enters the building. Look at the scene. The entrance to the building is behind Charles on his right. Jason comes in on his left. There's clearly a second entrance to the abandoned building. We even see Jason leave the window in that direction. Had Jason been using the same staircase and entrance as Charles, he would have exited the window towards frame left. But instead, he goes to the right, presumably to use the entrance that got him up there in the first place. So here's what's happening in the scene. Charles checks to see where Jason is, doesn't see him. He enters the building. Jason, shortly behind, enters via a second entrance to cut him off at the second floor. 7 seconds is plenty of time for him to run up the stairs, and we know that Charles is constantly stopping and looking behind him to make sure that Jason isn't around. Jason makes it to the second floor right before the sprinting Charles. Charles sees his pursuer in front of him and decides to pull a Trish Jarvis from Friday the 13th, the final chapter, going for a Hail Mary escape by diving out through the window. Notice how his silhouette in the window looks. Going frame by frame, we can see there's never a change in his momentum. And when his body leaves the window, both of his arms are blocking his face. In all other window jump scares throughout the series, and there are a lot of them, when a character is thrown through a window, they're not actively defending themselves against the shattering glass. You'll also notice that there's no second shadow in the window. If Jason was indeed the one tossing Charles out, you'd expect to see his hulking body also silhouetted somewhere against the glass in the scene. Nope, Charles runs up the stairs, sees his pursuer, jumps out the window, misjudging how painful jumping from a second-story window is actually gonna be, and is rendered helpless until Jason steps in to finish the job. The biggest question I have now is why Charles ran into the building and had a perfectly fine alley to run through. I personally have never been chased by an immortal hockey mask-wearing killer, but locking myself in a building seems like a terrible idea. However, much like with Eva and Miles, the fear of Jason is enough to cloud your judgment, I suppose. And you see, I think that's the point of this whole episode here. I know that a killer like Jason Voorhees seems mythic, but when you actually objectively look at the actions he takes, he's relatively human. Sure, he's a bit of a bullet sponge, and is definitely strong enough to punch a guy's head clean off his body, but outside of that, he doesn't have any magic abilities. We've concocted these epic stories of Jason, giving him teleportation powers that he just doesn't possess. He's able to kill people not because he's some supernatural beast who appears and disappears at will, but because his victims make mistakes. They see him and they panic. Instead of just running and not tripping, they race themselves into corners like Miles and Charles. They get cocky like Rowan. They panic like Eva. Or they just don't run in the first place like Elizabeth. In the end, Jason's deadliest weapon isn't his machete, it's his intimidation factor. And his machete. And the supernatural healing factor. You get the point. Anyway, it's all just a theory. A film theory. And before you teleport away to another video,
I guess that kind of solves the theory. I mean, maybe he's wrong. Maybe he just does teleport and, like, you know, it's just accidental coincidences that show that he does not teleport. But I mean, if I saw Jason, alright, I know this boy is thick, yeah, I'm gonna be like, you know what? I'm just gonna run. Just gonna run for my life. If he doesn't teleport and he just does smart decisions, I'm just gonna run. I'm not gonna stop. I'm not gonna be like, where's he? I'm gonna be dashing the other. I'm just gonna keep running, no matter what. But if you guys enjoyed the video, if you guys ever see Jason in real life for some reason, what would you do? Would you go for the closest building to trap yourself in? I would. But I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.